nation. In the past week, they have been raiding California in the last 7 days, right? And what culminated into the people now attacking the ICE agent on Friday, June 6th. And in order for them to get out safely and no one getting hurt, they had to call in backup forces. It is getting heated out there, y'all. Heated. Let me play the video so you guys can actually understand what's going on and how the people are really feeling about these raids that have been taking place across the nation. All right? Without further ado, let's go.
The fashion district, he can see what's going on. Carlos?
Well, you can see actually what's going on behind me. A lot of confusion here. There's really a very tense situation. You can see the Homeland Security FBI agents right here on the corner of Stanford and 10th. Now, this is how it all started. There was earlier this morning, apparently a raid by ICE here at a business called Ambiance. Inside, the agents were there pretty much most of the morning. Then a crowd started forming outside the perimeter. They started actually surrounding these buildings, and I'm not sure if this is what happened, but obviously the people inside could not get out because all of these people had surrounded the building. Well, that's when these armored vehicles started coming in. All these agents started coming in, and they surrounded the building. They were using pepper spray and got all the people that were around the building, got them out of the way so that they could bring in vans into the parking lot of the building. We're able to get some people that were inside, some of the workers inside. They put them in those vans to take them out. And now they are finishing their operation, then they're about to leave. As you can see, there's still a lot of confrontations happening here in the street. Here are the agents as they're leaving the area, and as you can see here, they're surrounded by people that are basically throwing things at them, telling them to get out of LA. They are people who are opposed completely to the ICE enforcement issues that are going on here right now. And we can see it's happening right here in front of us. This is where the people are protesting. You can see them over there. They're yelling at the agents. They have been tossing tear gas around. We got, our photographer, George Izquierdo, was right in the middle of it. He got hit by it. I was across the street. I could see and feel it in my face as well. But here you see the agents from ATF. Those are ATF, is what it says on them. But I also saw Homeland Security and FBI, and they're now leaving the scene. And here are all the people that are behind them, basically yelling at them, telling them to get out of here, and pushing them in a way out. But they're already done with their operation. As I said earlier, they were here, and they were able to get several dozen, it appeared, employees from this business called Ambiance. But now the operation is over, and they're leaving the scene, and you can see that all the people are basically following them as they leave. So they'll be with them for a little bit as they get out of the area, and that's what they're doing right now. You can see people with signs and others here very upset. But again, this has been going on for several hours right now. It appears now that thing is over, but now we're just waiting to see as the agents leave the scene, and you can see they're being followed there for a bit. But again, it's been very chaotic here for the last several hours. It now appears to be winding down a bit, but obviously tensions still very high here as people are very upset that Homeland Security performed what appeared to be a series of raids this morning. One here, also one earlier this morning at the Home Depot in the Westlake area. And this is what's been going on throughout the morning, but you can see this operation is starting to come to an end, but still quite tense out here. Back to you.
Well, Carlos, as we continue to watch this with you, I'm noticing as you saw ATF agents, we saw those vans.
Sorry if I can't hear, it's because, as you might imagine, a bit chaotic out here. We're connecting again. I think I can hear you now.
Okay, so Carlos, you mentioned ATF agents, but you also said Homeland Security. We saw ICE agents, you said, but they have mostly focused on just the one building, Ambiance, correct? And now as they leave, we're starting to see more tear gas, and it looks like fireworks. So the crowd is continuing to engage with the officers who are very methodically starting to leave the area. And it does sound like we're having a hard time communicating with Carlos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out to here, our screen there on the right and Carlos's shot are both live. But what we want to point out here is how these officers are now leaving. The ATF officers are very slowly moving, and you'll notice that some on the ground are trying to get the people to move out of the way. We have a piece of video that showed the vans as they were departing with some of the people that had been detained in those vans. And it was a very different scene. You can see that they've gotten the people and they put them in these vans. And as these officers, these authorities started to leave, it was a very strange sight to see, because they started to leave and there were people who were protesting, trying to keep these vans from getting out. And the video seen here is deeply troubling, because these officers, look, there's that person in front, and the officers did not stop, these agents or whatever federal authorities they were. And notice how this person continued to stay in front, and the officer did not slow. No officer came out and tried to get this out. And then watch as the person in front falls and hits his head on the ground. And that just seemed like it was an...
What was he trying to do? Really? What was he trying to do? Did he think that he was going to be able to somehow Superman stop the vehicle from moving forward? That was ridiculous. That's an action that could have cost him his life. But let's continue.
An injury, but then these agents then moved aside and then immediately took off, and we watched these agents almost as if it was a chase. And then they got together, this person and then a couple of other vans. See, they got together in the caravan, and we watched as those agencies, or those three vans, went to the Roybal federal building, where they took the people that they had detained and took them to the federal building, the Roybal federal building. That was the second caravan that had gone there. So then compare that to what you're seeing now. As these agents are leaving, they are leaving in a much slower manner, and there are officers that will get off of those trucks and they will move people out of the way. So Carlos is still on the ground, and if we can hear you again, Carlos, maybe you can see. I don't know if you saw that person fall in front of the truck, but they're exiting that area differently than when they took the detainees out.
Well, as you can see, the caravan has now left our immediate area, but a few minutes ago we did hear a number of flashbangs. Basically, I think there was at least 4 or 5 flashbangs, I guess, to try to disperse the crowd as they were trying to leave the area. And that's exactly what was happening there. This is Stanford Avenue. So the agents were heading south on Stanford Avenue, and they were doing some flashbangs there to try to get the crowd out of the way. You saw the large crowd that was following the caravan of agents as they left the area. So they needed to do that, I guess, to try to get out of the area. But again, tensions were still high here. It was very tense a short while ago while the agents were leaving the area. So as you might imagine, this has been quite an eventful day here in downtown Los Angeles that started this morning with a number of ICE raids across the area. And the last one that we know of here at the Ambiance, it's a wholesale business here in downtown Los Angeles, where ICE agents apparently went in early this morning. And from what I could gather is that the agents then could not leave because the building was basically surrounded by demonstrators and protesters who didn't want them here. But then they called in, I assume, the reinforcements to come in with some armored vehicles, and they pushed the crowd out of the way, literally pushing them, hitting them with either pepper spray or tear gas, probably just pepper spray, as they moved them out of the way, then moved the vans in, were able to load the people up into the vans and get out of here. And the operation ended then. And again, we saw as the agents were trying to leave down the street and they were being followed by the crowd, and we heard some flashbangs apparently to disperse the crowd, but now it appears that the agents have left the area. Back to you.
And we did see some protesters throwing things at the agents, but the flashbangs were coming from the agents back at the crowd. It was not the crowds throwing fireworks or anything at the agents, correct?
I do not know because I was pretty far. I was about a block and a half away. We just heard the loud bangs, and we went to see what was going on. We saw some smoke, so we're not exactly sure where the flashbangs were aimed at, but I can tell you that it did disperse the crowd a bit. That's certainly what happened.
Okay.
We're not moving out of the way because traffic is now coming down through on this street, so we have to get back out of the way and onto the sidewalk.
Okay. Carlos, thank you very much. So, Carlos, at the scene of the ambiance, we're going to go to Annabelle Munoz now. She's at the Roybal Federal Building, where the people who were detained were then caravanned over. And as we understand it, there were 2 caravans taken there. Annabelle, what have you learned from the Federal Building?
Philip, we were actually initially here because of reports that people who were attending their immigration appointments were being detained in that federal building. One organization says more than 24 hours in some cases. We're still investigating that. But then we got word that some of those units that were in the Fashion District were making their way here to the federal building. And we saw several of them, and we've seen them in different instances around immigration courthouses with plates that say DHS and U.S. government on them. So several of those have entered that parking lot that you see here, and several have exited the building. A lot of this happening pretty quickly. In some instances, they've had the sirens on. And right now, there's 2 officers that are posted out front of this parking lot. I don't believe that they were first here when we arrived. At some point, there was a car that pulled up, and there was some sort of argument. It seemed that individual was shouting at the officers. We should also note that some of those units that we believe are government vehicles that were pulling into the parking lot had been graffitied with expletives condemning Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE. We also spoke with an individual who pulled up on his bike here, and he asked us if we had seen that armored vehicle because he had spotted it in the Fashion District, and he was concerned about the immigration situation that's unfolding in Southern California and across the country. He said that he actually wanted to try to stop these vehicles with his bicycle, and then ended up trying to follow them to this area. We haven't seen the armored vehicle yet, but we've seen at least half a dozen of the white vans with the DHS U.S. government plates. We can't see inside of them, but our photographer did see that one of the individuals who was driving one of the vans was wearing a mask over his face, which is something that we have heard around the country, is that a lot of these immigration officers that are conducting these arrests are often masked. So that is what we've seen so far here. Like I said, sometimes it's been busier than others, but we do see that whatever is taking place is happening pretty quickly because there is a lot of movement in and out of this federal building.
Well, Annabelle, we saw the caravan just once they arrived, they went straight in. Now, we've heard reports earlier this morning of agents taking a couple of people into custody at a Home Depot in MacArthur Park in South LA. Now we've heard of the Fashion District.
Listen, I can say this much, that the Home Depots have been like a ghost town, Before you be able to go to Home Depot and you see a bunch of people hanging out looking for work, but now, none of that. It's a literal ghost town. Mainly cars in the parking lot, unless it's the customers that are actually going in and out to get their stuff. But I'm telling you, it's like a ghost town. All right, let's continue.
In downtown, you've heard of people being detained right there at the federal building. Have you heard any other locations, or are those just the locations that you've heard? Because it does seem that it might be happening around LA.
Yeah, as far as these larger reported arrests or detentions, I would say a lot of this has unfolded just in the last 12 hours or so. As it pertains to this federal building, when we reached out to DHS just in the last hour, and we've heard from one group, LULAC, who says they got reports both from individuals who were being detained inside of that building after attending their immigration court hearings, and they also heard from at least one attorney, if not more, and they provided us with a video that was given to LULAC by that attorney, where you could hear people screaming for help. And what they were describing is something that they say is incredibly unusual, and that is that people were being detained, not just detained in the federal court building, but possibly for more than 24 hours. They have a client or an individual who's now being represented by an attorney who is pregnant and was released because of her medical condition, according to her attorney. So a lot of this we haven't been able to confirm just yet, but we also spoke with Congressman Jimmy Gomez this morning, who says he's very concerned about these reports, and he actually plans to come out to this federal building tomorrow.
Okay, Annabelle, thank you very much. So Annabelle at the federal building reporting what's going on there. You're looking live at Air 7. You know, Annabelle was talking about that she had not seen the armored vehicle. We're looking at it as it looks to be making its way back to the federal building, should be arriving. It's important to note one of the things that we did see earlier, LAPD officers were seen, but as crowd control only. Crowd control only, and it is important to note that. We have not heard a response yet from either sheriffs or LAPD, or for that matter, anyone with the city as to what kind of notice they might have known. If they knew any of this was happening, if federal authorities notified anyone within the city that this was happening. At this point, we don't know why Ambiance was targeted. We don't know really if Home Depot in MacArthur Park had been targeted. We're really unaware because we're not getting a lot of information from the federal authorities. But what you're looking at here on the right is the scene from earlier. The crowd had really gathered and was trying to hinder the officers from leaving the area after the raid was over, after the detention was over. Everybody had been taken into detained, we'll call it, and the caravan had left. And so these officers who had come for help, you just saw, okay, the video, that's one of the first things that we had talked with Carlos about. You did see one of the agents roll the flashbang in the direction of the crowd. So they were trying to leave the area, but the crowd didn't want them to. So you see some of those agents roll the flashbangs in their direction, set those little smoke bombs off just to disperse the crowd so that they could leave. Because during the initial departure, one of the vans, there was a person standing in front of that van and the person fell. And it was incredibly dangerous. And it was somewhat terrifying to watch. I'm joined now by Colleen Sullivan. And Colleen, this might be the first time that you've seen this van.
Oh, no,
but
I saw this.
It was terrifying to watch this.
Yeah. And he was, you know that passions, they're running high. This is definitely never suggested to do, because these agents are going to get out of there. This person is clearly, and we saw this, but we did end up seeing that person who was just hit by the car. They did get up. I don't know if they were taken to the hospital, but I saw them sitting up. I saw them, the crowd gathering around them. But again, when you know that a car is going to be getting away, I don't know exactly what kind of investigation happens after this. I don't even know if that person stuck around. But again, you can see people were throwing things at that vehicle, that ICE vehicle, I believe it was, ICE agents inside the vehicle with other people who were detained. But you saw people throwing things at them. You saw people approaching this car. You can see that people, they are definitely putting themselves out there, showing that they are not happy with what's happening. And it's unsettling to see this on our streets here.
And you now are back to watching live images. And just to wrap up that last little scene that we saw, that was the trailing vehicle of that caravan. Right. And so clearly what that group was trying to do was to close ranks, so to speak, and get caught back up with the other two vehicles in that caravan. So now what we're watching is, again, as Carlos was telling us earlier from Ambiance, basically Ambiance, just to clarify, it's a manufacturer, importer, and wholesaler of casual apparel, founded in 1999. It's located in the LA Fashion District, downtown. And so clearly they had a workforce that, whether it's Homeland Security, ICE, whoever it is, was interested in. And so they went into that workplace this morning, and when word got out that they were there were people that basically surrounded that building, and the agents were not able to get out. And so that's when those agents called these federal agents. They surrounded the building and created an opportunity for the agents in the building to get their detainees out and into the vans. And as you can imagine, and you witnessed, the conflict began to intensify. Some of the protesters began to throw objects at the officers. The officers needed to exit the area. And all in all, it does seem as if the temperature has cooled a bit as everyone has left that area.
Right. And I do believe that, you know, these agents, the FBI, the ICE agents, they know they are going to be met with resistance. I'm not quite sure if they thought it was going to be to this level today, the way they saw people surrounding these vehicles, leaving, trying to keep them inside the area. And then once more reinforcements came, you know, it becomes scary as well. You do not want to be taken into custody. If you are undocumented, you are asking for a reason to be snared in this situation. Again, we don't know why Ambiance was targeted today in the ICE raids, but we know a lot of people, they are turning up for their ICE regular visits. They are being detained. You know, this is, again, we've been talking about it. We've been doing it on our newscast every day. This is happening across the country. But today, it looked like a coordinated effort to go to several locations. We're trying to figure out, are there more locations that are being on the raided list from ICE agents right now?
I think what we've learned, certainly with this, is how quickly it will intensify.
Yeah.
The idea that word spread that quickly and people were willing in that part of town, down there in the Fashion District, to mobilize very quickly and surround that and try to keep the agents from getting people out of that area. And they had a backup plan and they were ready to act in the event. So we are starting to see the federal agents mobilize here in LA. As you mentioned, it has been happening around the country. It is now happening here in LA. And this is the scene that you see here on the right. It does seem very orderly here on the right in the fact that they knew what they were going to do. They came in, they quickly grabbed who they were going to grab, put them in the van, and were going to take them away. And then they were met with resistance. Yep. Oddly enough, Colleen, not from the people being detained,
correct,
but from the people in the community who did not want them to be detained.
Yeah, you're sticking up for these people.
Yeah, and then that's when the reinforcements came in to try to protect all of the parties involved, not only the officers, but also the people who were being detained.
Yeah, and I also find it somewhat interesting to see law enforcement concealing their identities. It makes you wonder, are these all undercover officers? I know not all ICE agents are going to be, you know, in disguise, but you could clearly see they do not want to be recognized, and obviously for probably good reason, because everyone has their phones there. They're recording everybody's every move. But this really did get very heated not long ago. We even saw some of the federal agents, I believe they were, with smoke, like smoke grenades almost. They were just trying to dissipate the crowd, and I guess the idea that they weren't just smoke, you know, what they were, but when you see smoke being launched in the streets to try to get people to disperse, it did seem like it worked pretty effectively.
I think once you saw that person go to the concrete, potentially with serious injury, although yet, as you mentioned, the person did get up, but when you hit your head on the concrete, it's really risky. Bruce Thomas is joining us now, and I think Colleen brings up a very good point in why you would wear masks as federal agents when you're doing something like this. But Bruce, I think I'm going to kind of present something to you to ask you if this is accurate. But in this age of videos and pictures and people online basically stalking officers, I would think that that's one of the reasons, is that as an officer, you don't want your identity out there any more than it has to be, especially in an item or an operation like this, which is so controversial, given which side of the issue you might fall on.
Yeah, you know, years ago, when we did search warrants for the police departments, some of the narcotics officers wore masks to conceal their identity because they work undercover. And in this case, like you said, with the advent of social media, to get a photo of an officer, federal or local, and then you can do due diligence and find out who that officer is. And there have been cases where they have posted personal information about family, children, those kind of things. So it's very scary, and the officers are trying to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah, and earlier we were talking about what you do not see, by the way. Bruce, as usual, thank you so much for joining us on our live coverage of this breaking news story happening right now. We haven't seen the LAPD necessarily assisting in this, and we haven't seen the LA County Sheriff's Department participating in this ICE raid. We know that they're watching, they're making sure and monitoring, because that's what they would do to protect and serve the community. But what do you think is going through, sort of Chief McDonnell and Sheriff Luna about what they're seeing right now and what kind of involvement they should or should not be taking?
Well, from what my understandings are, LAPD and LASO have decided not to cooperate with the feds for a raid itself. Now, with that being said, if there does become a mass incident of civil unrest where it spreads in the community, then they would step in to protect life and property. However, they are not going to assist the federal agency, their federal partners, ICE, Homeland Security, in actually doing these raids. That's on them.
Yeah, and we do know that Chief McDonnell said it's not for him to decide what the immigration status is of people who are taken into custody when it comes to ICE. So again, this is one of those things where we're going to just keep watching. You're looking at live images right now from Air 7, and Philip, you see this sort of convoy of vehicles that came in to the Fashion District to help with the ICE agents who had taken quite a few people into custody. Now, exactly what the future for those people who were taken into custody is unclear. But again, we've been seeing this happening. And again, I believe some people have been detained at the Roybal Federal Building. But again, maybe Bruce, you can talk about it too. What happens to these suspects? Because we don't exactly know why they have been taken into custody for immigration, customs, and enforcement.
Yeah, Pauline and Philip, we can just back up a second. If you notice, ICE, Homeland Security doing these raids, they're not in marked police cars. They're not wearing marked police uniforms. They're very militaristic-looking uniform like the SWAT or the SAB teams have. So a lot of people are taken aback and shocked by this because, who are these people? And like you said, politically, with either side of the fence you're on, we can go back many years and know of a certain history that took place with this type of thing. Now, to answer your question, they're taken to the federal Roybal detention facility to be processed. What charges they'll be held on, we don't know. Locally, they're not going to be held on anything local, so they're going to go with federal immigration violations, maybe, something, a federal statute of some sort. But right now, it's all conjecture.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, since you went back, I want to take you back even another little step as our live shot there, real quick, our live shot we're looking at, it appears that's kind of a staging area near the 110-10 interchange. That might be where they started, and it could be CHP area there. We're trying to figure that part out, but that kind of gets me to my point. We mentioned LAPD. Yes, it is. Okay. So this kind of leads me to my question, Bruce. Where we have local law enforcement not assisting here, and my question is, do they know ahead of time, if that makes sense? Is it, we're not going to help you, but we need to know that this is happening because we need to have our resources in place for crowd control, for the potential of, as you mentioned, civil unrest, because we need to protect local businesses. We need to protect local citizens for any outcome that might not protect them. What kind of responsibility from the federal officials is it to protect other people here?
Yeah, Philip, a great multi-pronged question. First of all, it is the CHP Central Division headquarters. They're not staging at an LAPD station. They're not staging at Men's Central Jail or a local sheriff station. They're staging on state property, which it sounds like they may have told CHP, hey, we'd like to use your area for staging area. As far as them telling the local agencies what they're doing and where they're doing, my guess is they probably did not.
So then that would lead me to wonder, when Colleen asked, what is Sheriff Luna, what is Chief McDonald thinking? I would be angry if this happened in my city and I didn't know. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of phone calls made to some of the federal, people, ICE, Homeland Security. But once again, the feds play by different rules. We're the feds. We're the big bad sheriff in town, so to speak. And how much they'll share and how much they'll cooperate, once again, very little, I think.
Yeah, that's always so disappointing, Bruce, because you do always think that law enforcement is one big happy family, all in the quest to protect, but they do sort of go by their own verticals as well. Bruce, don't go anywhere, but we want to go to Annabelle Munoz. She is live at the federal building right now. Annabelle, you're getting some reaction from community seeing what's unfolding this afternoon.
Well, let me read an article that was put out by VC Star regarding the mayor of Los Angeles. So according to the article, it says, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti say he is worried that arrest of immigrants by federal authorities could trigger riots in Los Angeles and put police officers in danger. In an interview with the radio show Latin USA about President Donald Trump's immigration policies, Garcetti said relations between the Los Angeles Police Department and the community have improved in the last few decades, but that trust is tested when U.S. immigration and custom enforcement agents portray themselves as police officers or are mistaken for police when making arrests, the mayor said. If something goes wrong, let me repeat that, quote, if something goes wrong, I fear tinderbox out there, where people will suddenly say no and try to keep that person from being taken, unquote, Garcetti said. That's dangerous for those officers. That's dangerous for those agents, and we are going to have to respond. He continued on to say, Garcetti added that Los Angeles recently recalled the urban unrest from 25 years ago that was triggered by the acquittal of LAPD officers accused of using excessive force in the beating of Rodney King after a traffic stop. Quote, we know how quickly things can explode, unquote, the mayor stated. Arrests by ICE are up 35% nationwide since Trump took office, although they remain relatively flat in Southern California, right? So that was a statement in an interview on a radio station that was stated by Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles, California. But with that being said, let's continue back on with the video. All right.
Yeah, Colleen, we've spoken with people who've approached us after they've seen the situation unfold in the Fashion District. Others were noticing that some of these vehicles, DHS vehicles, are pulling into this parking lot, and many who are very aware of the immigration detentions and arrests that are taking place in different cities across the country. I'm joined now by Damien, who wishes to only share his first name with LA Street Care. Damien, talk to me about what you saw today and what you're concerned about.
Well, I'm concerned about a lot. So the first thing I saw, I went to East 9th and Santiago, and I parked my car to make sure they tried to stop the vans from leaving and the federal vehicles from leaving. failed, unfortunately. And I'm concerned basically about the rise of fascism, quite frankly. Immigration, anti-immigration, especially sentiment, is a very easy cudgel to divide people. And especially when you are dehumanizing and, using them as a scapegoat for, sometimes economic issues, things that just aren't really true. For instance, immigrants bring in, billions of dollars a year. Sometimes tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, billions of dollars at least, at the very least, to the local economy, national economy, federal economy. They're a big part of our society and what's important to make America great, actually great, not the sort of fascistic America first slogan that Trump and, of course, the Republicans and conservatives in our country try to frame it as. And so, and on top of that, as I was speaking about earlier, we have American citizens who especially recently, that came in legally, came in through the proper channels and still got taken down, still got taken into custody. And so we have issues of like, where's the line? Where's the slippery slope of like, okay, well, especially without due process. That's the biggest issue we're having right now is without due process. It's like, well, are you an American citizen? It's like first they came for the immigrants, first they came for this, and who's going to be next? So we want to stop that at its, sorry, stop that at its root if we can.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about and what a lot of advocates are bringing in attention to is, for example, the immigration courthouses. We're seeing that people's cases, for example, are being dismissed. They were in immigration removal proceedings, and then the government says they want to dismiss their case, and that makes them susceptible to what's known as expedited removal, which means they can be deported without this hearing actually playing out. And so many are sounding the alarm, saying that due process is being done away with in the immigration system. As you see kind of these situations unfold, what do you see your role as a community member?
As a community member, bringing attention is a big part of it, in terms of just bringing attention, even as small as social media, even as much as talking to your representatives, but more importantly, being on the ground if you can. Obviously, there are people who are disabled, there are people who have other financial, like in terms of families, in terms of other responsibilities, it makes it more difficult. But if you are able-bodied, if you have the time, I think putting your body on the line for your fellow citizens, for your fellow people who are marginalized, I think it's really important, in terms of just showing up for numbers for protests or showing up for like activism like this, where it's trying to stop ICE from actually bringing the vans to the detention centers, as that was our attempts, at least as far as I understood, on East 9th and Santiago. I put my car in front of the thing to try to stop the vans. We tried to crowd, what we could do, but we got flashbanged. I have footage of me being pushed around by one of the officers. I have their face on my cell phone. Trying to do our best. What we can do. It's obviously we're outgunned. We're maybe not outnumbered, but there is obviously financial, billions of dollars go into just LAPD alone, one of the biggest funded police departments in the world. In fact, more GDP goes towards the LAPD more than it does to some actual countries' armies. And so we're dealing, we're on a back foot to a certain extent, but it doesn't mean you don't try. It doesn't mean you don't put the effort in. So that's my idea. It's like their self-defense, SDC, I'm trying to remember the acronym. The Community Self-Defense Coalition is somebody, or is a coalition, and it's a group that does try to help with that, non-violently, obviously. And I work with other mutual aid groups that try to do the same thing, of just trying to show up, just trying to be for the community, trying to bring numbers and trying to stop. We've seen it around town, like megaphones, trying to tell immigrants their rights and trying to make sure they don't, trying to put our bodies on the line, because I think that's the price of freedom sometimes.
Thank you, Damien, for taking the time to speak with us and share your perspective on the situation that we're seeing. No, thank you. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we're seeing. I think Colleen and Philip, you may have touched on this as well, is what the community response has looked like in different cities around the country. We saw a big turnout, for example, in San Diego. We're expecting a rally here in downtown Los Angeles at 4:30. We know word is spreading about that here in downtown Los Angeles, outside of the federal courthouse. So we will stay here, continue to monitor things. I don't know if it's happened just in the last few minutes as we've been conducting this interview. I haven't recently seen some of those DHS vans pulling in or out of this parking lot, but we definitely saw many of those earlier here this afternoon.
Okay, Annabelle, thank you very much. We are watching the live shot there on the right as some of the vehicles are starting to leave that staging area and going to various places. Let's go back to Carlos Granda. He is at the Fashion District where all of this began. Carlos, what have you got from the scene that we saw such activity earlier?
Absolutely. Well, it certainly changed a lot in just the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes, because after all the federal agents left, a lot of the other people that were here protesting also left. But behind me, you can see there's still some traffic here on Stanford Avenue near 10th Street, because that's where the store is. It's called Ambiance, and it's a wholesale business, and that's where apparently ICE agents, Homeland Security agents went in this morning into that business. They shut down the business. You could see through the glass doors that they were inside there with employees. Now, what happened next is what we're still trying to all figure out, but we have some video of the confrontation outside. And apparently, after the agents were inside, then they were trying to get out, but protesters and demonstrators had surrounded the building. Because of that, then other agents came in, and they brought in some armored vehicles, they brought in a lot of personnel, and they literally pushed all the protesters aside. There was pepper spray, and they were able to open up the gates. They brought in the vans and loaded up some of the people from inside that they were arresting, put them in those vans and take them out. But again, it was a very tense situation, a lot of a big confrontation, a lot of confusion outside as all of this was happening. But this operation took maybe about 20 minutes or so, and then they were able to get everybody outside of the building, and they left. And while they were leaving, the crowd was pursuing some of these Homeland Security agents down the street, yelling at them. And then the agents, from what we heard, we were about a block and a half away, we could hear about 4 or 5 loud flashbangs, and that's used usually to, get people out of the way, to scare people, and that's what we heard. Very loud flashbangs. But again, there was a big confrontation in the street, a lot of tense situation here, as there was a confrontation between hundreds of people in the crowd and all the Homeland Security agents.
Carlos,
that
thank
were
you
trying
so
to get
much.
into
We're gonna gather some.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it here, but it's getting hectic out there, more and more hectic every day, and people are noticeably nervous. There's a lot going on, and when I say that there's a lot going on, there's a lot going on for a lot of people, right? So stay safe out there, everybody, right? And as I like to say in closing, question everything, because if you don't, you may fall for anything. Think and say. Have a good day.